What if I told you the most powerful voices shaping your child's education don't teach, don't parent, and don't even live in your community? For decades, American parents believed that education was a local matter. School boards were elected, teachers lived nearby, parents attended PTA meetings and shaped policy. But today, local control is a myth, a convenient illusion. Behind the classroom door is a machine, well-funded, well-connected, and ideologically driven. At the center of it all, billion-dollar foundations. Organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and George Soros's Open Society Foundations have quietly funneled over $10 billion into America's education system. But this isn't just generosity, it's strategic influence. By funding curriculums, teacher training, education technology, and academic research, they don't just support schools, they shape what gets taught, and more importantly, what doesn't. The Gates Foundation's flagship initiative? Common Core. This is where the dumbing down of America's children took root and took hold of the education system. While Gates reshaped how students are tested, the Ford Foundation focused on what they're taught. They've poured millions into promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs across public education. On the surface, these initiatives claim to uplift marginalized voices, but under scrutiny they often replace inquiry with ideology, individual merit with group identity, and academic rigor with activism. The result? A classroom less focused on teaching facts and more focused on shaping beliefs. Somewhere along the line, education stopped being about excellence and started being about appearances. In the name of fairness, we lowered the bar. We told kids that effort didn't matter because everyone deserves the same reward. We handed out trophies for just showing up. We graded on curves that erased achievement. We stopped celebrating the student who stayed late studying and started praising the one who didn't try but showed up anyway. We told an entire generation, you're all equal, but we forgot to ask, equal at what? Not every kid will be a scientist or an athlete or a top scorer, and honestly, that's okay. But when we pretend that merit is oppression and effort is elitism, well, we don't create justice, we create mediocrity. And the ones who suffer most? The kids who could have soared if only the system hadn't clipped their wings. If the Gates Foundation rewrote the curriculum and the Ford Foundation rewired the culture, then George Soros's Open Society Foundations quietly dismantled accountability itself. While most people associate Soros with criminal justice reform, few realize just how deeply those policies have bled into public education. Under the banner of restorative justice, classrooms were turned into social experiments. Suspensions were discouraged, consequences got softened, and accountability was replaced with so-called equity outcomes. Classrooms that were once led by educators are now honestly ruled by disruption. Teachers walk on eggshells, students push limits with, well, no pushbacks, and achievement, it's in free fall. But this wasn't an accident. This isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a long game, a pipeline of control, stretching from the classroom to the courtroom. Rewind to 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act. Marketed as an accountability reform, it promised to boost achievement through standardized testing and school report cards. But behind the patriotic branding was a trap. Schools that didn't meet testing benchmarks lost funding. Teachers were forced to teach to the test. And education? It became less about learning and more about survival. And while classrooms were being strangled by red tape and unrealistic benchmarks, another front opened, the justice system. The same names, Gates, Soros, Ford, began backing district attorneys, bail reform, and policies that prioritize equity outcomes over actual justice. when prosecutors decline to prosecute, when discipline is replaced by ideology, and when educational failure is rewritten as societal success. You haven't just shifted the culture. You've reshaped the rules of reality. You've created a generation unsure of right and wrong because the systems that once upheld truth now distort it. This isn't charity. This isn't compassion. This is calculated influence, packaged as philanthropy and sold as progress. While parents check backpacks and scan report cards, billionaires are rewriting what those grades even mean. They're not just donating, they're designing the values. One district attorney, one media narrative at a time. Because when you control how the next generation thinks, you don't have to fight the current one. It's time to follow the money and pull back the curtain for good. Imagine this, you begin to notice the same exact phrases. In the 1950s, the CIA launched Operation Mockingbird, a covert effort to influence the American media by embedding agents within newsrooms. The goal? Control public perception by shaping the narrative. Today, control doesn't require undercover agents. It happens through consolidated ownership and corporate narratives. Just 5 major companies now control 90% of all U.S. media. This means fewer voices, fewer perspectives, and far more synchronized messaging. So, what does media control have to do with schools? Honestly, everything. When news outlets echo the same narratives promoted by education policy groups and elite foundations, well, dissent is drowned out. Parents who question curricula are painted as extremists. Teachers who push back are accused of misinformation. School board meetings become battlegrounds, not for truth, but for control. And it's all reinforced by the 24-hour media machine. The media is supposed to be the watchdog, but today it's the lapdog. When journalism trades truth for influence, when questions become crimes, and when dissent becomes dangerous, education suffers, democracy suffers, and the generation watching it unfold, they suffer most of all. So what happens when people begin to speak out? When teachers challenge curriculum, when parents question board decisions, and when citizens ask, who's really making these choices? What happens next? Across the country, educators have lost their jobs for refusing to promote ideologies they don't believe in. Not because they were unqualified or ineffective, but because they asked the wrong questions. At school board meetings from coast to coast, parents began to show up, concerned about what was being taught. They questioned mask mandates, gender policies, racialized lessons, and transparency. And how were they rewarded? In 2021, the National School Boards Association sent a letter to the White House, likening parent protests to domestic terrorism. Days later, the FBI got involved. These weren't extremists. They were moms, dads, concerned citizens. But in today's climate, asking questions is a threat. And what about those inside the system? The whistleblowers. Teachers and administrators who expose questionable policies or political bias often face harassment, termination, and character assassination. An anonymous California teacher shared lessons being taught to children, lessons that promoted activism over academics. Her reward? Threats, smears, and ultimately unemployment. In healthy systems, questions are welcomed, but in corrupt systems, questions are punished. And when fear replaces free speech, education becomes propaganda. The classroom becomes a battleground, and those brave enough to speak become the casualties.